Good morning. This morning I want to try and attempt to reveal what goes on in the spiritual realm, what people don't understand about. I want to talk about the new birth and the fight, because there's a fight, there's a war going on, whether you realise that or not. As a Christian, as someone having Christ living in you, there's a war going on. I want to talk about what I remember when I first came into a new life, into a new and living way, a life of being born again, of Christ, the hope of glory living in me. You know, when I first came to know Christ, you've heard me say this many times, the love and the joy of God was incredibly good. But I soon discovered I had an enemy called Satan. You know, he's the dude in the red pajamas with a pitchfork that people laugh about and think it's funny. But friends, there's a reality. There's a spiritual war going on, and it's happening in the unseen realm, the eternal realm. You see, I never realized until I tried to escape from this prison that I was actually in a prison. What prison am I talking about? Prison of drugs, alcohol, seeking witches, clairvoyance, all that stuff. Until I tried to get out of that stuff, I never realized I had a spiritual foe, and that I was in a spiritual prison. I was stuck in this place until I asked Jesus into my life. You see, the devil, Satan, and his demonic horde, they don't care what you do. Do anything you want, just don't worship Jesus. Don't cry out to Jesus. Do anything else. That's the whole crux of everything in eternity. The enemy wants to keep people blind so they cannot see the truth. You see, the demonic realm, they don't just let prisoners go. They don't just say, oh, there goes another one, how good. You know, we'll just let him go. It doesn't work like that. Especially when he is then bound into his schemes. You know, when there's an enemy out there that's got somebody bound, you know, again, whether it be the drugs, whether it be witchcraft, whatever it is, he doesn't just want to let people go. You know, I see some people as come to faith, and there's not much of a fight at all. But some, there's a full-on fight. I was one of those. I had a full-on fight to actually maintain freedom, to get out of that realm, because I never knew I was a prisoner. You see, this demonic realm does not just let prisoners go, especially when he has them bound into his schemes. I was working for the devil unbeknowingly. Not that I knew that, but seriously, that's what goes on. You know, we're blindfolded. So through drug use and drug trafficking and getting people drinking with me, I was an agent for everything dark. I was encouraging people to spend time in that life. You know, as Christians say, they're evangelists to help people. I was an evangelist for the enemy. I was helping people get on drugs, get hooked, use drugs, use alcohol. Let's party, ha, big joke, doesn't really matter. Friends, it does matter. That comes with a big cost and a big price. We see movies all the time about people selling their soul to the devil, and we laugh at that. But you actually do that when you deny Christ and when you start playing with this stuff. You open up doors and you become a prisoner. So now I became a Christian, and I was fleeing this kingdom of darkness. You know, most people laugh foolishly and think the demonic realm is not real. You know, it's a big joke, what? How funny. You know, we see the cartoons, as I've said before, you know, demon on one angel, on one shoulder, angel on the other. But these things are real. It's very real. And demon spirits, what they do is they blind the eyes of his prisoners so that they don't recognize their prisoners to satanic beings. They get blindfolded. They don't even realize what's actually got them. They just think, big party, big joke. You know, have you ever heard people say things like to you, I've had this said before, you know, you're a Christian. You can't drink, you can't take drugs, you can't do this, you can't do that. And the truth is, it's the other way around. You see, I could do any of those things. But Jesus, what he did, he gave me my freedom back to choose. I could drink, I could take drugs, I could do any of the things anybody else does, but I have a choice. I don't want to do that stuff. Why when I've got something far better? But people that are in that lifestyle, they don't have a choice. They're a prisoner. They have to take drugs. They have to do drink. They have to do all the things. Why? Because they're bound. They're prisoners. And they don't see it. So as I said, when I gave my heart to Jesus, the fight to take me back as a prisoner was very intense. You know, there were 2 times in particular that I remember that I actually said in my first 6 months as a Christian, this is too hard, I think I'll give up. Because the battle with these evil spirits was so intense. It was full on. There was all sorts of mind games going on. Torment. I used to have to hold my head because I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know how to fight this stuff. I had all this stuff still living in me, all the junk that needed to get out. See, the enemy had hooks in my life. When there's still stuff there that you haven't repented of, the enemy still has hooks to try and drag you back into things and use torment against you. So when I said that, this is too hard, I quickly come to my senses and change my mind. Quickly said that. Why would I want to go back there? What's back there but death? So the spiritual fight, the torment in my mind, the threats from people who are bound by devilish spirits came at me fast and furious from all sorts of places. You see, when I first come to faith, the enemy revealed himself. I could literally see demons on people's faces staring at me in the streets. These things glared at me. I didn't realise that the only ones who could see these grotesque faces was me. But the enemy had come out, and I could see into the spiritual realm, and I seen demonic faces all over the place. It was full on. If you don't understand these things, and you've never been through these things, you'd say this guy's a spiritual nutter. But until you've experienced this stuff, because an argument is no match for an experience. You see, once you've experienced this stuff, you just know. You see, the enemy had shown himself to me clearly. On one particular night, I remember a cold, evil presence came into my room. I was living in Werribee now. I'd moved out of this shed I was living in. I was only there for a couple of months, but I could feel fear lurking around me. Next minute, as I was lying on my bed, I was being pinned down to my bed by an evil presence that I couldn't see, but it had my mouth, and the force of this being had me stuck to the bed. I was unable to move. I wanted to pray out to Jesus, I wanted to speak, but I couldn't because it had my mouth. It was holding me. So in my mind, I started praying, Jesus, help me. And I didn't know much about prayer or spiritual warfare or anything, but I was saying that, Jesus, help, Jesus, help. I couldn't speak because this demon was holding my mouth closed. Eventually this spirit let go because I kept praying to Jesus for help. It left the room and the icy fear left with it, and my bedroom was flooded with the peace of God. Then over the next few weeks, everywhere I walked, the spiritual realm was opened up to me. I could see these demons very clearly. My opponent had not shown himself to me before, but because I had turned away from him and now gave my life to Christ, Satan and his demonic horde had shown himself to me. I literally saw demonic figures, as I said before, on the faces of people that he had as prisoners. These people were glaring at me, even gnashing their teeth at me. The enemy was angry because I had come out of his prison of drug trafficking, drug addiction and alcoholism. And he knew I was going to take many with me and do damage to his kingdom of darkness. Friends, don't think the enemy doesn't have a strategy and a plan. But the good thing is, no weapon formed against you will prosper. You see, when you begin to know God and his word, no weapon formed against you will prosper. Yeah, weapons get formed, they never prosper. He causes me to triumph through all things. I'm blessed going in, blessed going out. I've got authority over the enemy these days. I have authority because of Christ, because he's given me that authority. You see, when someone comes out of darkness, there is always a fight for the person's soul. When you see someone come out of a drug scene or a really hurt scene where they've been abused, sexually abused, damaged, all of that, you've got to understand that there's a fight going on. We can't just afford to leave new Christians and say, she'll be right, mate, because she's not a right, mate, because there is a fight. And I remember that fight, and it was intense. The more you come to know Jesus, though, the struggle against the powers of darkness becomes less and less. And hear me when I say this, it might be intense, but if you can trust in God, it's the most exciting journey you could ever experience. You kids out there watch these, play these games, of fighting dragons and all the rest. But the day you come to Christ, the literal fight is like that, but you're in it. How exciting that is. Seriously, that's what happens. You begin to see and know that you've got the authority, that you're the winner. You win every single time. I remember on one occasion, I was only a Christian for about 8 weeks, and I was on a train coming back from the city to Werribee train station, and suddenly I was hit by these spirits who were attacking my mind. It was so bad I had to hold my head. The moment the train stopped in Werribee, I got off this train and bolted across the road to my flat, and I tried to sleep so these demons would just go away, because I didn't know how to fight them. I never knew how to pray. I never even knew what was happening to me. I just knew that I was under attack, and it was full on. I was holding my head. we see a lot of people in the world without Christ that do not know how to fight this stuff, and people end up with schizophrenia and hearing voices and all this sort of stuff, yada, 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 all of that. They don't realise what they're actually dealing with. It's actually demonic encounters they're having, but they don't know Christ, so they don't know how to deal with it. They end up going insane. You see, I knew these things were attacking my mind and tormenting me. They were spirits without bodies, but they're very real. The only thing that kept me going forward to get to know Jesus more was the experience of his beautiful, tangible presence of love. This is what kept me through the fight. You've heard me say many times, I've done a lot of drugs over the years, but when I come to know the presence of God, it's like, why would I want drugs? You see, you know what drugs is? Drugs is the counterfeit of the real thing. People have a void in their heart, so they get drawn to drugs, alcohol. It'll fulfill that void, make them feel good for a little while, but in rebellion, slight moment of peace, then comes the torment. You get in the presence of God, that presence is far better than any drug I've ever experienced, and you actually feel grouse, is an old word, but you feel blessed. It's a new word. and the more you get in his presence, the more your mind begins to become clear, sound mind, loving heart. He starts to change everything on the inside. All that pain, all that hurt that you were carrying, the surgeon's knife of the Holy Ghost gets in there and starts to heal you, starts to set you free, because you're now a new creation. So I remember finally getting some work as a young Christian, as a welder. This was something I did years before I became a drug trafficker. The days at work were intense. It was full on. The fights I had in the workforce, in the mind, was just full on. Satan did not give up attacking my mind. I remember one morning I woke up for work, and as I went into my living room in my flat, I experienced what I can now only describe as literally the hordes of hell sitting in my living room with me. I could see in the spirit, and I could sense and see it all around. It was like a whole living room of demonic presence just sitting there watching me as I'm having breakfast. I didn't still know exactly how to fight this stuff. The thick oppression in the room and the sense and feeling of many evil presences were all around me that morning. Just sitting in my lounge room, and I did not know how to get rid of them. They were there everywhere. I didn't know how to tell them to go. I didn't understand. I quickly learned about warfare, though, let me tell you. But anyway, that morning I went to work. That morning by train, then another train, then a 40-minute walk, because I had no money for a car as of yet. But this evil presence followed me all the way to work. This day was a day where I sang Christian songs all day, just worshipping, And I remember the song, it was, I delight in the Lord with all my mind, all my heart and soul. Anyway, I kept singing it over and over to myself all morning in this welding bay. And I was aware and conscious that there was a spiritual fight between angels and demons going on around me in this welding bay. It was full on. Not far from lunchtime, I heard in my heart the words, the battle is over. And I can only assume that the angels defeated these filthy demonic spirits. After I heard those words, I went on the most euphoric, pleasant time I've ever experienced in God's presence, and it lasted 3 days. This experience was far better than any drug rush I had ever had, and I can only describe it as complete love. This overwhelming presence, it was awesome. This is why people turn to God when you experience him. See, for me, it had to be an encounter, because I'd done everything, all the drugs I've done, the drink, there's nothing I hadn't done. So for me, I had to experience the presence of God. I needed the experience. And anyone, I think, that's come out of that scene needs to experience who Christ is. Not have some words on a page, you need the experience. You see, people turn to drugs, as I said, because they're trying to fill the void, the emptiness of the love of God. And so Satan offers them drugs, the complete counterfeit, and then he imprisons them. How many people I see imprisoned to drugs, and they look at you and laugh and say, oh, aren't you bored? You can't take drugs. And it's like, seriously? I'm having a party. I'm having the best days of my life. You see, in those early days of my walk with Jesus, I've had people pray for me that have had demons controlling them instead of God. And through these people laying hands on me, these demons have had access to my life. So much so that their struggles had instantly become my struggles. Now, why is that? Now, I can have anybody pray for me today, and that same thing won't happen. I'll receive what Christ wants to do in me, but there's nothing for the enemy to actually hook into me and actually put that junk and trash in me. So I have faith when people pray that I'm going to receive from God. I remember a man once who was totally hooked on pornography, and the moment he prayed for me, instead of experiencing God's presence, I had all sorts of thoughts going on in my head. I immediately got someone who'd been walking this walk for a while, a pastor friend of mine, who was sold out to God to pray for me, and these thoughts lifted off instantly. He had the authority to do that. You see, as you grow in your faith, you find that through prayer, the many entry points in your life that you had from demonic harassment seem to lose their footing against you until they're no more. They lose their footing. So then if people with unclean spirits lay hands on you and you pray for you, the enemy can no longer transfer through you through the laying on of hands and affect you like that. What I mean by laying on of hands, if you put your hands on someone and start praying and they've got stuff in them and you've got your own battles, then that stuff can actually go into you. You need to be careful with that. But because they do not have an entry point to oppress you anymore, they can't do that. So that's when you need to learn to grow in Christ first, and be careful who lays hands on you. I recall another time as a young Christ follower, I was about 2 months old in my faith. I decided to go and see my mother on the other side of Melbourne by train. Interesting time. This day I was wearing a hoodie, but this hoodie had a metal pentagram on the actual front of the blazer, whatever you want to call it. And it was something I was oblivious to. I didn't even know what a pentagram was. Didn't take any notice. It was just a shirt. What can that matter? And my mother had a lifetime of witchcraft, clairvoyance and seeking spirits to talk to her. And as I went to visit her this day, I fell ill because of the witchcraft presence coming from my mother and the pentagram I was wearing, and I had to leave. You see, the enemy still had hooks in me. So this stuff affected me, and I got sick. I had to go home. That night I went to the church. They had a meeting on, and the service started, and the illness got worse. My pastor at the time saw this pentagram on me. I told him I was going home, but he asked me to stay so some other Christians could pray for me. He asked me about the pentagram I was wearing. I never even noticed it until then. To me it was just a hoodie. But this pentagram had power. He helped me remove it from this hoodie, and then he prayed for me. As he did, the sickness left. Then when the meeting finally got started, a group of Christians prayed for me and started praying against all of the occultist strongholds, and they were told to leave. You see, the occult is an abomination. It's totally devilish, totally demonic. Brings you into darkness, brings you into torment. The devil comes to rob, kill and destroy. Why would you want that stuff in your life? So by the time I got home that night anyway, in my room, because they've been praying for me when we were at the church, I felt a dark evil presence come out of me, almost like a swirling wind, and leave the room. Then a great peace. I knew some demons left me. People walk around in blindness. They think, devil doesn't come anywhere near me, whatever, yada yada. Bible says the devil blinds the unbelievers, blinds their minds so that they cannot hear or see. They don't even realise their presence until they try and get out of this stuff. Over the years I've prayed for people, and suddenly I've seen them slither across the floor like a snake. This is called a python spirit. The spirit that manifests itself looks just like the spirit in the movie Exorcist. The lie about that movie though is that the devil has power. He doesn't have any power over a Christian, especially one who knows their authority. But I've seen this sort of stuff. I've prayed for people. I've seen demonic stuff come out and start manifesting, but it has to leave. Those suckers in people have to leave. If you know your authority, that stuff has to go. So when people have been released from demon powers through prayer, through casting demons out of people, I've even heard that the person let out a loud devilish screech. But then you hear this evil spirit keep screaming, only now it's not coming from the person. You can hear the screeching sound leaving through the walls of the building as the demon leaves in terror. I love that. It's like music to my ears when I know an evil spirit leaves a person. Seriously, you actually hear the screech leaving the building. It's left the person, but now you can hear it leaving the building. Sadly, people that have been blindfolded and hoodwinked by these spirits, they don't even realise that they're prisoners. Do evil spirits communicate with each other? Of course they do. You see, they're an organised army. I remember years ago I was preaching a message about this saying where people say, "Que sera, sera. The future's not ours to see. Whatever will be, will be." People say that. Walk around in blindfold. It's called blind faith. Got no idea who Christ is. Let's just do it. Que sera, sera. Yeah. So I'm preaching that. And anyway, I was preaching through that same message. I was saying, that the enemy can actually, speak to other parts of this organised army. Yeah. So I'd gone out the other side of Melbourne this day, and I'd had lunch with an auntie of mine, and she sat there looking at me like with a glazed look on her face, smiling at me, had no idea what she was doing, but she was being operated by this spirit that was trying to mock me. And you know what it was singing to me? Que sera, sera. The future's not ours to see. Anyway, you know the story. But she was singing that, looking at me with this smile like no one was home, and just sneering at me. She didn't realise it wasn't her fault. She was just being used by this. Another time, a time with my ex-wife. I was in the city in Melbourne in a bookstore. We were going to a Christian bookstore, and there's a pastor friend of mine there that was already there, and he was concerned for my faith. I'd probably walked in a wrong area at that time, And anyway, my ex-wife was talking to me, but I couldn't hear her. These spirits were just blinding me, and I had to hold my head, and I had to say, please don't talk to me, I can't hear a thing. And anyway, it's because these spirits around us knew that where I was heading next was to see this pastor, and his words were going to be the undoing of him. So I got there, and I ran into him, and he said straight out, Peter, what are you doing? You're off track. You need to get your heart right, come back, and it really spoke to me. And that's why, you see, these spirits have already knew where I was going to go, who I was going to see, what was going to happen. So don't think they don't go before you and see. They're always sizing you up. But the key is not to put your focus on the enemy, on the wicked one, on hairy legs. Keep your focus on Christ. Keep trusting in him. Keep trusting, knowing that you got the victory, knowing that the devil's under your feet. He's a defeated foe. I recall another time I went down to my old stomping ground in Deer Park. It's probably about, 3-4 months into my Christian faith. I was going down there because, I used to want to go down there and try and help my friends find what I found. And I'm down in this Dumfries Street where I hung around for years. And when I walked into there was an evil atmosphere. And I picked it up. But what the weird thing was, these vile words started coming out of my mouth. Now, they weren't my words. I was actually controlled by this spirit, and the stuff that I was saying, it was clear that something was still on the inside of me from this place I was in. I was this spirit was wanting to express itself. And after that, this enemy got exposed, and that sucker had to leave. I went and got some more prayer. But see, because I still had stuff living on the inside, and don't freak out about that, because people do, but the more you come to know Christ, the more that stuff has to leave. The devil and his demonic horde wants to keep people away from Jesus. In the book of John 15:25, Jesus said that people hate him without a cause. They don't even know why they hate him. They just hate him. You mention that name, don't mention that name, and people haven't got a clue that it's demonically inspired, that they're in a prison, so they say that. Again, the reason they hate Jesus is because it's simply demonically inspired. People use Jesus' name as a swear word. Why do they do that? They don't know, they just do. They don't use Buddha or Muhammad, because the devil knows the only name that has power to be saved is the name of Jesus. You see, the devil's plan is to keep you away from Jesus. The devil doesn't care what you believe in. Believe in anything. Do whatever you want. Do what thou wilt, is what the Satanic Bible says. Do your own thing. The only thing is, don't accept Jesus. Don't worship Jesus. That's what the enemy does not want you to know about. It's been 24 years now for me knowing Jesus, and it's been awesome. Knowing I've been given authority over evil spirits because of Jesus who lives in me. What an exciting adventure. But it takes guts to leave your prison. It takes guts. See, anyone can say a prisoner of evil and laugh at followers of Christ. You need to stop hanging with losers. You see, the devil was stripped of his power. He's made a public spectacle of on the day Christ crushed his head and took the keys of hell and death off him. The devil's very real, make no mistake about that, but he's a loser. You don't want to be hanging with losers. Hang with Jesus. It's the most exciting life you could ever ask for. I can't believe everyone doesn't want to know him. But I do understand, because it's a demonic fight to keep people's minds blinded and keep their souls in prison. Why not ask Jesus in your heart today? Do you have the guts to go on the most exciting love-filled adventure you could possibly imagine? Or could you stay in the devil's counselling session and let him continue to rule you? Because people do. They keep listening to the lies, the junk, the crap, and then they get anger and hate and yada. I want to hurt this person, I want to do this and that. Oh, I've had enough of this life. I think I'll commit suicide. That's not God. Think where those voices are coming from. These spirits that keep on tormenting you with thoughts of anger, hate, sorrow, loss and pain. You see, the devil comes to rob, kill and destroy. Stop walking with that sucker. Choose life instead. It's so much more fun. And by the way, who wants to go to hell as a trophy of Satan's, when you can experience God's awesome presence, love and power in your life forever? How do you find God? It's simple. I always say I got his phone number, and people say, what are you talking about? You got his phone number. It's that simple. It's when you seek God with all of your heart, You will find him. With your heart, not your head, Fred, but your heart. When you really seek God with your heart, he'll reveal himself. And he doesn't want to whack you and say, oh, you know, you've been a bad boy. That's the devil does that. He wants to bless you, give you life, hope, future. It's an exciting adventure. It's the most joyous thing you could ever experience in life, is knowing God. And when you seek him with all your heart, it won't be you might find him, you will find him.